Hello and welcome to this presentation of Ralph Ellison's style, setting, and themes within his novel Invisible Man. We'll be looking at the way in which Ellison constructs this novel and the overall statements and questions that he really wants his readers to ponder and think about at the conclusion of reading The Invisible Man. The overall style of Ellison's novel is a familiar one to people who have read some other major African-American works, or writers such as Richard Wright, Langston Hughes, Countee Cullen, and whatnot throughout the 20th century, particularly those involved with the Harlem Renaissance, such as the names that I just mentioned. His writing teams with sound devices, particularly alliteration, and utilizes anaphora to highlight some of his most poignant points. Essentially, it's a lyric style, and Ellison, with his musical and artistic background, is heavily influenced by jazz, and many literary critics suggest that Invisible Man, reading it aloud, is more or less listening to jazz music take place with the different melodies and rhythms that are present within the novel. It's interesting when you compound this with the fact that in the prologue, the narrator is listening to Louis Armstrong. Why do I have to be so black and blue? And so there is some very heavy jazz influences within the book, and his writing style really mimics that of a jazz composition. Very rhythmic at points, frenzied at others. The pace, really kind of switches back between a much slower pace and a much quicker one. So his overall style echoes many of the previous African-American writers and his contemporaries, but it is very heavy with a lot of influence from jazz, and the sound devices of alliteration and anaphora really highlight those uses of music within his writing. While Ellison does employ an impressive vocabulary, his style cannot really be classified as being formal. It is almost lyric in nature with its considerable use of sound devices. The reader feels like he or she is riding down a river rather than sitting on a chair. And as I mentioned, it's almost as if there's a melody, there's music in the background with his words, with the different paces that he employs within his work. Some of the scenes, such as the battle royale earlier on in the novel, might have a little bit more frenzied pace when he's describing the imagery that's taking place within the boxing ring. Other parts, and also with some of the speeches, you can really pick up on the frenzy tone, the climatic nature of it. At other points, it is a rather more slow-paced novel that's more has more of a melody feel to it than anything else. But his use of these sound devices really gives the reader something to pay close attention to while he or she is reading the novel. Similes and metaphors, particularly in the battle royale, the Golden Day, the Liberty Paint scenes, extend the effect of the sound devices as far as emphasizing particular thematic points. So with the battle royale, you have this rite of passage that young blacks have to go through at the hands of whites in order to become accepted in society, or if accepted might be too strong a word, but at least to be recognized within society, but still in a submissive nature. In the Golden Day, you kind of have this microcosm of what African-American life is like, especially for veterans from World War I, in this case with the Golden Day, where it is simply just a microcosm of the chaos that ensues within their inability to be recognized as anybody. And Liberty Paints does an excellent job of portraying how blacks are assimilated into a white society, and with the use of the paints taking the black dope to make it even brighter, where the culture, the heritage of the blacks is essentially sucked away in order for the greater good of the white masses of the United States. The focus of the novel clearly is the alienation of African Americans in an otherwise ostensibly free society. He analyzes the ways in which race is used as a mechanism of power, not only by whites over blacks, but by some blacks over other blacks. Particularly Dr. Bledsoe would be an example of this. Could also throw Lucius Brockway into this mix as well. This alienation becomes apparent through the frenzy tone, essentially driven by the syntax of much of the book. So the speeches, the confrontations between the narrator and Dr. Bledsoe at the college, confrontation between the narrator and Lucius Brockway in the bottom of Liberty Paints, even confrontations between the narrator and other brothers within the Brotherhood. The syntax of the work really drives home this frenzied tone. So again, you're getting that quick-paced frenzy of a jazz composition taking place within the work at these very important and poignant moments within the course of the novel. The central question of the novel essentially then becomes, how can one person make a difference when all of the avenues to power are occupied by the duplicitous? Well, no matter where the narrator tries to pursue success and autonomy in an authentic manner, he finds the road of him blocked by those who have decided to collude against those who are below. With him going to give his speech in Chapter 1 at the Battle Royal, he finds that he has to go through these hoops of the boxing match, of the electrified carpet with the coins on it, in order to simply get a certificate, a scholarship, in order to go to the all-black college. At the college, he finds the roadblock between someone such as Dr. Bledsoe. You could even begin to throw in Mr. Norton. This only gets even a stronger roadblock as he goes off to New York City and finds out the true nature of the letters when he meets young Emerson. Within New York City, he is finding roadblocks, whether it be someone such as a Kimbrough, Liberty Paints, the doctors at the hospital. Next, you have Roz the Exhorter, eventually coming Roz the Destroyer, Brother Restrum, Brother Jack. The Brotherhood in general, constantly roadblocks are being formed in front of him in which he cannot, in that authentic manner, pursue his success and individuality, his autonomy. His initial solution to hide in a basement and steal power from the electric company fails to solve this overall problem. While he might be able to kind of take the power from the white light, from the white company, he ultimately decides that he has to come forth and actually pursue change. Poignant moment for this is certainly going to be in Chapter 23, when he comes across Reinhardt and realizes that the nature of invisibility, it can be a curse, but it also can be a blessing in disguise, as to so far as you're able to manipulate the use of invisibility and become recognized as who you want to be, as opposed to being recognized as who the viewer wants you to be. So simply just hiding will not solve the problem. And of course, in order to do this and come forth and pursue change, you have to be able to leave your past behind. The burning of the suitcase with the Sambo doll, the letters, the scholarship and whatnot, all of those really signify, symbolize that he is willing to leave his past behind and become somebody new, somebody who he wants to be with his use of his invisibility within the daylight. The setting of the novel, which is somewhat shocking at some moments, is rather accurate. The details of the period are accurate. You're looking at the 1930s, 1940s, including descriptions of apartment housing, public transportation. The working conditions are accurate. The use of scabs instead of when the union workers are on strike at Liberty Paints is wholeheartedly accurate. The descriptions of the college that the narrator attended, as well as the trip around the city and the Golden Day, those parts are as well accurately reflect the conditions and expectations placed on black students within the South. So you might have a beautiful campus, notice again with the white buildings, because it is funded by the white trustees, with the difference of the black powerhouse representing Dr. Bledsoe. To have this picturesque college in a rather rundown, very rural, dispossessed community would not be uncommon at all for someone attending an all-black school in the South in the 1930s or 40s. Contemporary problems in racial relations are also reflected throughout the novel in a couple of the following ways. The taboo of white-black romantic relationships is reflected in two ways. You have the white woman, the burlesque dancer, who appears before the Battle Royal, as well as the tryst between Sybil and the narrator. So you do have these stereotypes that are taking place of sexuality with blacks, with the white-black romantic relationships, and then also as well with the Jim Trueblood. This would be a stereotypical portrayal of an African American by the white community as a sex-crazed person who both impregnates his wife and his daughter. So Ellison is not afraid to kind of play with these stereotypes and these taboos throughout his novel, An Invisible Man. Black power figures were often seen by other blacks as conspirators with whites, so Dr. Bledsoe ultimately reveals himself as this sort of person in two ways. First, his letters urging the trustees to avoid the narrator, and his conversation with the narrator before sending the narrator to New York City. So for someone to become ahead, to come to the higher ends of a power structure, even if he was African American, if he was black, he might be kind of construed as a traitor in some methods. This you can also see within the Brotherhood, as other brothers, whether white or black, do start to look at the narrator differently as he is attaining more power within the Brotherhood, and as Brother Westrom brings up the whole magazine interview fiasco that takes place in the second portion of the book. You can see how there is this jealousy that takes place of blacks who are able to move up the power structure, whether it be by whites or blacks who hold this jealousy. The problem of stereotypical dolls and images of blacks is confronted in two ways. You have the narrator confronts Clifton for selling Sambo dolls on the street, essentially, these dancing dolls, which ironically you would have the Brotherhood who is holding Clifton and the narrator by the string, such as a Sambo doll, making them move in any way they want. And when he smashes the coin bank that is shaped as a demeaning African American caricature. Of course, he smashes this bank. He cannot get rid of the bank whenever he tries to drop it off within Harlem. In one place where you would expect for an African American, a black male, to be invisible, to blend in Harlem in the early morning on the streets. This is one point where he is not invisible, and he cannot get rid of this caricature. He cannot get rid of this bank. Essentially, he cannot get rid of his past. He cannot get rid of this curse that his grandfather mentions to him over and over, and he continually is going to be running until he is able to leave this stereotypical image caricature of him behind. This is something that he's unable to do until toward the end of the book, when he burns all the contents of his briefcase and is able to get rid of that Sambo doll and that preconceived notion of what an African American male would be. As well as the stereotypical images of blacks, the benefits and the drawbacks of the Communist Party in America are well represented by the Brotherhood's actions and machinations within Harlem. And the conflict between the assimilationists and the separatists within the black community are represented by Dr. Bledsoe and by Roz the Exhorter, who ultimately becomes the destroyer with the chaotic riots that are taking place in Harlem by the end of the novel. When people try to classify Invisible Man as a type of novel, the only real term that can probably best be utilized to describe the novel would be the picaresque novel. It's due to its plot structure, which finds an unnamed first-person narrator who's hardly the typical literary hero. Essentially, he is an anti-hero, stumbling from episode to episode, interacting with characters from different levels of society. And so, with this being the case, Invisible Man can best be viewed as a picaresque novel. And you'll see the description of it. The picaresque novel developed in Spain and gets its name from the Spanish word picaro, which means rogue or rascal. It's an episodic narrative, usually in the first person, recounting the adventures of an anti-hero as he drifts from place to place and from one social setting to another. Thus, the main character's story evolves into an ironical or a satirical look at the hypocrisy and corruption in society. Rather than presenting an idealized or overly optimistic view, the picaresque exposes the harshness of reality and the baseness of human nature. And so some characteristics to this type of novel would be a first-person narration, which certainly we have, a naive narrator or main character, something that is rather episodic in nature. It's told in flashbacks. The main character, the narrator, is a sympathetic anti-hero. The main character or narrator's experiences take him to many different locations. The main character or narrator's experiences take him through several levels of society. And because of the main character or the narrator's naivety, social commentary is left to the reader's inference. Some other well-known picaresque novels would include Don Quixote, History of Tom Jones, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which you have read this year, On the Road, and The Catcher in the Rye as well. So this is certainly not a unique novel, but it's one that really fits these characteristics of that episodic, a sympathetic, almost anti-hero narrator telling his story, his struggle, in this rascalish and roguish type of manner. I hope you enjoyed reading Invisible Man, and keep in mind that, again, having a good, strong, thorough understanding of Invisible Man is one that will serve you very well when it comes time to the AP exam, because it is one of the most commonly asked about novels on that last open-ended free response question. Best of luck.